All right, ready to go? All right. So welcome everyone. We are going to provide an orientation to both thesis and non-thesis agroecology students. My name is Lynn Sollenberger. I'm graduate coordinator in the agronomy department. I am with Dr. Diane Rowland, who is, what would you say your title is relative to agroecology? Are you the coordinator of the agroecology program in agronomy?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll go with that. And we also have a couple of agroecology students with us. Ben, right?
Yeah.
And Anastasia.
Yes.
So, all right, so for those of you who are viewing, I would suggest that as a starting point, you make sure that you have the agroecology handbook in front of you, either the electronic version or hard copy that we sent you. We sent you only the electronic version, because we'll be referring to that as we go along. Just to begin the process here, I'm going to ask Dr. Rowland to give just a general overview of the agroecology program. I think probably you are familiar with aspects of agroecology, but a little bit of background and history I think would be useful.
Actually, I think you probably know the way back history of it, because I think this idea was tossed around for a while.
That's right.
But when I was hired in 2010, one of the charges that I had for my position was to work with Dr. Jerry Bennett and Dr. George Hockmuth to start this program. And I think originally it was thought of as a non-thesis distance-only program, and since then it's really expanded into thesis options as well. So we have cohorts of students that are doing DE, non-thesis, and thesis degrees. So it was originally designed to be a very broad interdisciplinary program, because the input that we've had from industry and academic institutions is that our global agriculture requires a more broad training. And so this is a collaboration between the agronomy department and the soil and water science departments. And so a student can choose either department to get their degree under, and then they will be granted a concentration in agroecology. So the program itself, we've got these materials set up, which have core courses and elective courses, and those have been chosen to represent the broad disciplinary aspect of what we define agroecology. And one of the first classes that you'll take in the program is an overview course of what agroecology is, and you'll get a global aspect about, what that training involves. It was the first available distance-only program as well, so you could take the full program off campus, and that has allowed us to do a couple of things. We have a very diverse student body, so we've got some international students, and it's brought a very interesting cohort together, so you should be able to gain a lot of experiences from each other. I think that's been a valuable aspect of the program. It has also allowed us to place UF students internationally, and for them to do their research and stay in place, again, to have a global aspect. And then we also have more traditional, what we think of as a traditional agronomy student that would go through this program as well. And the difference there is really in the curriculum. So I think that's probably the
Good.
most appropriate overview.
Okay. All right. So the program has gradually grown over the last few years till the point where we're sitting here today in August of 2015, and the student numbers are now up to 18. So there are 14 students who are in the non-thesis program and 4 in the thesis program.
And that includes just agronomy?
That is just agronomy, that is correct. So I don't know what the numbers are in soil and water science, but that is strictly within the agronomy program, right?
And the soil students are having a separate orientation, because there is a difference, but you will overlap together quite a bit. So you'll see a lot of the soil students that are in agroecology through the soils aspect.
Okay. And one thing that I would draw to your attention right up front is that, as I said, there are thesis and non-thesis students. Most of this orientation will be geared toward the non-thesis students, but those of you who are watching who are thesis students, I think there will be elements of this that will be particularly relevant. And also, those of you who are thesis students, that we will be providing an additional orientation that addresses particularly those aspects that are most relevant to thesis and dissertation students in the agronomy department. So let's jump in, and basically what we're going to do is just walk through the process that you will encounter throughout your program. One thing I would like to mention just before we start that, and this is somewhat more on the philosophical as opposed to the mechanistic piece of this, but that is that as a graduate student, you now must take ownership of your program. And as an undergraduate, perhaps you may have been more passive, expecting folks to kind of tell you what to do and when to do it. As a graduate student, you assume a higher level of responsibility for your own future and for your own program. One of the challenges that we are addressing as we relate to a particularly non-thesis student who may be at some distance from campus, we may or may not ever physically be in the same room with, is that old expression, out of sight, out of mind. And we would hope that that would not characterize our interaction with you, but you must understand that faculty who are serving as your mentors have a lot of things going on. And so, although we will make every effort to engage you regularly and address your needs in a prompt and responsible manner, you still have to own responsibility for making sure that your program flows according to the outline and the design that is laid out for you. So you have to take, as we talk about things like getting a committee appointed and getting your program of study approved and getting a project approved and so on, these various steps in the process. Yes, that is your mentor's responsibility to engage you in that effort, but ultimately it is your life, it is your degree, it is your responsibility, so you need to make sure that that is happening in a timely manner. And one of the purposes of the orientation is simply to let you know what the expected time frame is for those activities, so you know whether you are on schedule or not, and whether you need to kind of prompt your major professor to be a bit more responsive or proactive, all right? So there is nothing wrong with an email to an advisor saying, I think we need to be working on my program of study. So that's simply a bit of kind of word to the wise to start this process on. Okay, so let's kind of walk through the process. What we're trying to do now with students who are admitted to agroecology is either prior to the time when they start classes or within weeks after they begin classes, is to have an advisor appointed. Okay, so that process, for those of you who are watching who do not yet have an official advisor, that process is underway, and I would hope that by September that would be resolved for all of you. In the interim, if you have questions about what you should be registering for or any other questions relative to the program, those questions can be addressed to either Dr. Rowland or to me. So that's kind of where we're headed with this, is we're going to try to get you an advisor appointed as quickly as possible. In the interim, any questions, address those to Dr. Rowland and myself. Okay, so then once the advisor has been appointed, then that kind of sets in motion a sequence of events that will lead you through your program. And just to follow that a bit, we have on page 13 in the handbook a little chart that illustrates a 2-year time frame for the degree program. Now, I recognize that some of you who have particular work or family or other responsibilities may not be looking at a 2-year time frame, and that's perfectly fine. But this simply outlines kind of we can't account for what everyone's time agenda might be, right? So this is simply selecting a 2-year time frame and giving you an idea of the progression of events that you would follow. So this is for someone, as you can see, first term, this would be someone who's starting in the fall of 2015. And then one of the first things that we need to do is we need to identify your faculty committee, your graduate committee. So that's a process that you engage in conversation with your major advisor. So the major advisor comes first. So once you have a major advisor, then you can begin that process of discussing the composition of the graduate committee. We'll talk about that specifically a little bit later in this conversation. But basically, for the non-thesis students, you are looking at a graduate committee composed of 3 members, okay? Your major professor is one of those and 2 others. And we'll talk about that more specifically in a few minutes. With a thesis committee, you're talking about 4 members, your major professor and 3 others. Okay, so that's one of the first things that you'll work at with your major professor. And our suggestion is that you have that committee in place by the end of your first term of study. So if you're starting this fall, by the time we hit Christmas break, we would like for you to have your committee appointed, okay? The other process that begins very early in your program is to develop what's called your program of study or your Form 2, okay? And that's simply the list of classes that you will be taking as part of the overall degree program. And again, we'll come back to that and look at it in more detail in just a minute. But again, we would like that to be done by the end of the first term. That helps you to avoid any problems in terms of taking a course that really doesn't kind of get you to where you want to be. It also allows you to get the input from your committee into the process so that it works out most efficiently. Okay. Then what would follow at that point would be a meeting with your graduate committee. Now, if you are a student on the Gainesville campus, we expect typically that you're going to have a meeting around the table like the one that we're sitting at today, perhaps with 1 or more faculty members participating by video conference. There's perhaps greater degree of flexibility in terms of how that meeting occurs within the context of agroecology, particularly for those of you who are not in the Gainesville area. So you can work with your major professor and kind of figure out what's going to be the most efficient way to handle that. In terms of the discussion of the program of study, that could possibly occur electronically. I think when you get to the point, and we'll talk about a degree project in just a minute, when you get to the point of talking about that, I think there would be significant advantages to actually having at least a video conference that was built around that theme. All right, so back to the kind of the chronology here. So by the end of the first term, you will have identified your graduate committee, you will have composed your program of study, and about that time then, kind of at the end of your first semester, beginning of your second semester, you should be getting feedback from your graduate committee about that Form 2, that program of study, and making sure they are all on board. So we'll show you a form in just a minute, but we have a form that you fill out. You get the signatures of each of your committee members. That's basically a contract. You're contracting with your committee that you will take these courses. They're contracting with you and saying that if you complete these courses, then you have completed the course requirement that's necessary for the degree program in which you are engaged. Okay, so you can see that the list or the guidance there for committee meetings is is somewhat flexible with optionals and so on there, and so you can work with your major professor to do that, but just make sure that you are engaging your broader graduate committee in the process of deciding what the classes you're going to take, and then eventually in terms of your degree project. Note that the time frame for the degree project is somewhat flexible. You need to keep in mind that it must be completed, obviously, by the time of your last semester. And I should mention that that degree project is relevant only to non-thesis students. Thesis students will actually have a research program and a thesis that derives from that program. So we would anticipate that there would need to be some significant planning effort involved between you and your major professor in terms of deciding upon and then designing that degree project. Dr. Rowland will talk to us in a few minutes about kind of the nature of those projects. But at any rate, we would expect that would require some pre-planning. You've also got to build in time for execution of the project and then for writing that project. So obviously that's not all going to occur within the last semester. You probably need a year from the time of kind of initiating the planning to execution to completion of the project. Okay, so Diane, that's kind of the overview that I had, and then I was ready to move through some of the specific aspects. Is there anything that
Did you want me to go over the project now, or?
I have that down the list just a little
Okay.
bit. That's okay with you. And you guys have any questions so far?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Very good. So now we're going to go back to kind of the beginning of the handbook and go to page 3. And you will notice if you are a non-thesis student, page 3 is relevant to you. If you are a thesis student, then page 4 is relevant to you. There are a lot of similarities between the degree programs. There's some differences. I'm not necessarily going to read through these and point out everything that's the same or different. Clearly, one of the differences associated with a thesis program is that you do have credits for master's research, and that is not an element of the non-thesis program. So effectively, if you use, let's say you're a non-thesis student, if you use page 3 and page 5 as guides, it will take you a long way in terms of establishing the courses that you are going to take. So you can use those two as kind of a beginning part of that process, and then engage your major professor and your committee to finalize the specifics in terms of the courses that you will take. There are a number of electives. There are some and/ors that you can choose one or the other. So there is some flexibility there to tailor the program to your particular needs and requirements. Okay. Anything about the Form 2? Right here?
Page 6 is the same sort of thing for the thesis.
That's correct, right. So pages 4 and 6 would be kind of the complementary pages for the thesis degree program. One thing I would point out that we're working on, but is still not totally resolved, and that is for those students who are state employees, and they are getting tuition remission through the EEP program, okay? In the curriculum for the non-thesis program, you will notice that there's a class AGR 6932 and another class AGR 6905. These numbers do not code for courses that EEP will reimburse, okay? We're kind of working at that a bit at the moment to see what we can do about that, if anything. But that structure based on past experience is pretty rigid. And so I don't know how successful we'll be. But at this point, you need to be aware, if you are a non-thesis student taking advantage of that employee benefit, that at this moment at least, we cannot guarantee that those 3 credits will be reimbursed, right? And we will keep you updated on that, and if we'll just send out an announcement to everybody as we kind of work toward a resolution of that, whatever that resolution will be. And I can't guarantee that it will be positive. So we'll do what we can. Okay. Then moving on sequentially through the document, you'll notice on page 7 there is an evaluation form. Within the graduate program, the way we run the evaluations is that at the end of your first term, whether that be summer or spring, fall, you'll receive an initial evaluation, and then annually thereafter. So the form that is included in the handbook is for non-thesis students. If you are a thesis student, there is a separate form that I had trouble getting the structure to fit within this document, and so I just decided to leave it out for now. But there is a separate form, and your major professor will get that form at the appropriate time when you will be evaluated. So that's simply calling this to your attention that will happen. Categories for your evaluation are there. And basically the main difference between the non-thesis and the thesis forms is that there were elements of the thesis evaluation that relate to the research program. And clearly those are not relevant to the non-thesis. Okay, moving right along then, the next several pages are just screenshots from the website. There is a link at the top of page 8 to the website if you have somehow missed that to this point. The entire agronomy website, as well as the graduate programs and agroecology and so on, is in a state of renovation. And so we would hope in the not too distant future to have the site revised and upgraded. And I don't think at this point we can say exactly when that's going to be. Is that fair? We
yeah.
can say when we hope it would be.
Actually, we now have a separate link.
Oh, you do? Okay, good.
And so really the only purpose for the website for current students would be that information that's in the handbook. There are pages on here where it's available online. So there's not a whole lot that you would necessarily have to go to the website for. But yes, everything's being updated.
Okay. Very good, thank you. And so then let's skip on back to page 14, which talks about the supervisory committee and some of the activities of the supervisory committee. So we mentioned the composition of the committee briefly. The first 2 statements relate to that specifically. So the non-thesis students, you need a minimum of 3 if you wish to have more. But recognize that the logistics of having more people become more complicated because you have more schedules to deal with. But if it's particularly relevant for you to have more than the minimum, that is fine. The requirements are that at least one of those must be from agronomy and one from soil and water science. Where the other member or members come from in terms of their departments, that is up to you. For some of you who are working internationally or in other locations, you may find it particularly relevant to have someone on the committee who is not a UF faculty member. And so long as you have 2 UF faculty members on your committee, then that third person could be someone, could be from somewhere else. So if there is a PhD level person who you're interacting with in some capacity that's particularly relevant to your interests, your future, and so on, we'd be happy to entertain with you that conversation about having a non-UF person be a member of your committee. The MS Thesis Committee, again, the only difference is that there are 4 members of that committee. At least two must be from agronomy, 1 can be from soil and water science. And again, you interact with your graduate advisor to sort that out. Time frame we already addressed. We talked about the graduate advisor being the one who does your annual evaluation or your first term evaluation. So that is described. And then there are a few comments about seminar. We'll talk about seminar in just a minute. Those of you who are in the non-thesis program, when you enroll in the seminar, you would enroll in AGR 6932, AgroEcology seminar. For those of you who are thesis students, you would enroll in AGR 6933, agronomy seminar. I think that's correct, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. The thesis students, when they enroll in seminar, they will present the results of their thesis research program. The non-thesis students, we will talk about that in just a minute when we get to that. It's a couple pages back in the document, so hang on relative to what that enrollment and what the responsibilities look for the agroecology seminar for non-thesis students. Okay, so what does the committee do? Well, they, toward the bottom of the page, they approve your coursework. They provide overall guidance. Typically, some of those interactions that you have with committee members provide opportunities for you to have folks who can provide a letter of reference. They've been more involved with you professionally. They've seen you operating perhaps in a broader range of contexts than a faculty member who may have had you for one class. So it's very good to cultivate those relationships with your supervisory committee. Rely on them, interact with them, engage them in the process. Speaking from experience, as member of many supervisory committees, I typically, if I am the advisor, then yes, I take that as my responsibility to make sure that the student is on track and so on. But if I'm a member of the committee and not the major professor, then I rely on the student to tell me when they need me. Okay, so don't expect the members of your committee to, kind of show up in the morning with coffee and a bagel. They will expect you to contact them whenever you need their assistance, and so you should be proactive in that regard. Your supervisory committee also conducts your final exam. For thesis students, that's the thesis defense. For non-thesis students, that's when you present your degree project. Again, we'll talk about the project in more detail in just a minute. Okay, I think that's all for that page. Over on the next page, the thesis committee, and I think we've actually addressed all of those issues in terms of the responsibility of the thesis committee as well. Okay, so you guys have anything that wasn't clear up to this point? All right, so now we're going to talk more specifically about the project. And so again, this would apply to non-thesis students. For those of you who are thesis students, you will engage with your major professor in designing a research project that will serve as the basis for a significant amount of the work involved in your master's program. The non-thesis students, then, there is the degree project, and so I've asked Dr. Rowland to kind of give you a bit of an overview on that process.
So this project was designed to be very broad because we expected, particularly for the non-thesis students, to have a whole host of backgrounds. So really, this project and what is required to complete it is up to the committee and really up to the major advisor mainly. So we've got for example, a very diverse group of different types of projects. One student in soils finished basically a literature review with some case studies looking at soil degradation in Kenya. We've got one that is interested in urban cropping systems, and she's going to try to have a experience in Haiti to use as a case study for that project. We've got a high school teacher that is developing some curriculum for UAB work, and so he'll present basically that plan of where a high school teacher could then implement that in their classroom. And then we've got probably more, a student that was more aligned with what maybe a thesis would, a subject matter would involve, and that was looking at different soil moisture technologies and blueberry production. But again, it's not as extensive. It's not a replicated randomized trial, so to speak, maybe more of a demonstration. So very wide variety, and it was meant to be that way really to match the interests and the backgrounds of the non-thesis program.
Okay. All right, very good. And there is information on page 16 that discusses the non-thesis project, and then again on page 17 some more information in terms of timelines and so on. One thing to keep in mind relative to the project is that the credit that is assigned, it's a degree requirement, yes, but then in terms of the evaluation of the project, that is done through the course that is numbered AGR 6905. And so basically you would take AGR 6905 during your final term of study, and the basis for the evaluation of your performance and the grade that you would receive in 6905 would be in terms of the written project that you have prepared that summarizes what you have done. And also it is expected that then you would make an oral presentation. And again, how that's done, whether that is recorded and distributed to a committee, if it's done by video conference, if it's done in person, that's going to depend a lot on your circumstances, and we can work with you in that regard. And you would make those kinds of arrangements, primarily with your major professor. But the assumption is that there would be both a written and an oral presentation of your project. And those in aggregate then would form the basis for the grade that you would receive for AGR 6905, and that would occur during your last semester. Okay. Anything that I forgot there or that wasn't clear? And again, for thesis students, that particular issue is not relevant. All right. I think the last thing that we want to talk about then is the seminar policy. And what we would, and it's somewhat different than for thesis and non-thesis students. So for the non-thesis students, there is an agronomy seminar that occurs every fall and spring semester. And those seminars are recorded, and there is a link on page 18 where you can access those recordings. What we are asking of non-thesis students is that during the semesters when you are not registered for agroecology seminar, that you simply view those seminars. That would be about probably 30 to 40 minutes a week of effort to have some basic understanding of the types of research programs and areas of inquiry that are going on within agronomy, specifically at University of Florida, but also it would give you some sense of some of the major issues of importance in agricultural production throughout the world. So during the semesters when you are not registered for AGR 6932, you simply are responsible to view the seminar on a weekly basis. During one semester, and it cannot be during the summer, it must be fall or spring because that seminar does not occur during the summer, then you should register for AGR 6932. This can really be at any point in your program when it's convenient for you to do so, but you register for the class, and then you are responsible for another layer of activity during that semester when you register. And on page 19, you'll see an agroecology seminar evaluation sheet. So during the semester that you are registered for the class, for each seminar you are asked then to evaluate that seminar using this evaluation form, and then send that evaluation form to your major professor. So you're not Dr. Rowland, unless Dr. Rowland is your major professor, not to me, unless I'm your major professor, but to your advisor. And then your advisor will be responsible for ensuring that you have completed an evaluation for each of the seminars during that semester. And then they will assign you the grade for that class, that one credit class, at the end of the semester. If perchance you send the first evaluation to your advisor, and they send you an email that says something like, "What's this?" You can refer them to their mentoring handbook for agroecology students, and just refresh their memory that they are responsible for grading your evaluations during that semester. Again, because the program is relatively new and we are adding new advisors as we go along, there's a bit of a learning curve to the process for all of us, and that will be the case, may be the case for your advisor as well. All right, so that's the seminar policy for the non-thesis students. For the thesis students, those of you who are off campus, internationally or wherever, again, we would expect that you would participate in the seminars during the semesters when you are not registered by viewing those seminars, as we just discussed, for the
synchronous
non-thesis
or
students.
asynchronous, right?
That's correct. That's correct. So there is a synchronous link and a recording.
Right.
So you can do either.
Either.
That's right. Okay. And then we are also requiring of the thesis students that they would register not for AGR 6932 agroecology seminar, but instead for AGR 6933, which is agronomy seminar, and that you would present the results of your thesis as any other thesis student would. Now, exactly the format for that, if you're working at an international institution and you are not here during that semester, then we can work with you on that. We had a seminar that was presented some time ago, a year ago or something from Peru. So that would just be something that you would need to be aware of, that it's a requirement that would be done during your last semester. And you would need to then engage in a conversation with your advisor prior to that last semester, because the scheduling of seminars occurs generally before the semester begins or right at the beginning of that semester. So engage your major professor if you are not going to be physically present and you are a thesis student, to determine the mechanism for how that presentation will be made to the agronomy seminar. But as we said in the past, we simply were all gathered in the seminar room, and we viewed the seminar as it was being delivered from Peru. Okay, that pretty much wraps up things that I wanted to go over. We do have at the very back of your packet on pages 20 and 21 a list of the current students, those who are in the non-thesis and the thesis program. Should you wish to be in contact with those students, that can be arranged. We are technically, I guess, not allowed to distribute email addresses for students, so that is why we do not have email contacts there. But if you wish to get in contact with any of your colleagues, we can find a way to arrange that. I think that wraps up all that I have to say. Any questions from Ben or Anastasia?
I don't think so.
Good. And Dr. Rowland, anything that?
Nothing more that I can think of to add.
Okay. All right, very good. If there are issues, and there probably are some, that we did not cover that you still have questions about, please contact Dr. Rowland, contact me, contact your major advisor, and we'll be happy to discuss those things with you and get answers to you as quickly as we can. So thanks for joining us, and we hope you have a great start to your program. For those of you who did not previously watch an orientation and have been in the program a while, we hope you're having a great experience, and please interact with us and keep us up to date on your progress. Thanks.
So
Friday is the new student, new thesis dissertation student orientation, and Anastasia was already through that at the beginning of the summer. So if you want a free lunch, you're welcome to come, since I didn't provide lunch for you.
It wouldn't tempt me with a free meal because
Hey, stop by, have lunch with us, 12 o'clock, maybe. 12 to 12:30.
lunchtime.
Yeah, so
Ben can stop by.
you're welcome to, or we'll also have an orientation in the spring.
Okay.
So that's totally up to you.
Yeah.
Oh, I think you can come up. You can come on Friday, right?
Maybe.
Yeah. To Gainesville.